Welcome to Now Serving, a Side of Therapy, your intro guide into the therapeutic world. Together, we'll explore various aspects around how to show up for ourselves and others by tending to our own mental and emotional well-being. I'm your host, Dalton Huckabee, a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm grateful you've joined me. What's your take on the importance of having an official diagnosis or not?
It depends per client. Some clients don't need it. Some clients are able to externalize and be like, oh, I see like how this is impacting me. I get it. Like, I don't really need a diagnosis to understand myself in this way. Other clients really want the diagnosis. And some clients want the diagnosis so they can get the medication. Other clients want the diagnosis to be like, I really need someone to confirm for me that this isn't me, right? Like this is something I'm struggling with. This is not a personality trait that I have. So it's per client, and I'm there to meet them where they're at.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna jump down a little bit to how it can affect your work life. So with ADD and ADHD, I think it's cool because by the time that you found a career, you have already subconsciously or consciously decided what you're good at and what you're not good at, and probably found a job that works for you. If you haven't done this, then you probably are jumping around work a little bit. You might be jumping position to position, or you might actually just be jumping jobs in general. So you get kind of one or the other. The person who's figured out what their niche is and is like thriving, or the person who's moving around a lot. Regardless of where you're at in that journey, the struggles are kind of the same, which is time management, right? Arriving late, procrastinating, or underestimating how long projects will take. Organization, losing track of deadlines, emails, or paperwork. Sustained attention, especially if you're in a long meeting or you're doing repetitive or boring tasks, you're probably likely to zone out or make mistakes. Prioritizing, being able to do the tasks that are the most important first and then doing the rest of it. Along with the prioritization is you might get hyper-focused in ways that maybe your company doesn't actually want. Your project was about A and B, but you found C really fascinating. And so then you spent like 3 hours doing C, and A and B just kind of got like half done. And so you might get feedback around you're taking too long to get the important task done. And then once again, the emotion regulation piece, which is like taking criticism very personally, feeling overwhelmed at work, especially when you have a lot of tasks to do, not being able to really like figure out when to start which one. But on the positive end of those is with ADHD, we have creativity and innovation, right? We generally think out of the box. I don't think I've met anyone. That's unfair to say. I'm sure that these people exist, but I think a lot of people with this diagnosis struggle with rules. Like rules really have to make sense in order for people to like follow them. Otherwise, it's just like, what's the point of that? So because we're constantly questioning all the guidelines and structure around us, I think that can give us a position of creativity and innovation, of understanding things from out of the box. The positive end of hyperfocus, right, is that if you're at a job that you actually find interesting, then you can delve in. Me, for example, I find my work that I do super interesting. And so poor Dalton has had to read 10 pages of ADD outline stuff.
I'm not complaining though. I love it though. I'm here for it.
I appreciate you, but it's a lot. I definitely went full hyperfocus on this. And then we can have a high energy. We can be enthusiastic. Also, because we're so used to getting distracted, we can tend to be very flexible. So we can kind of turn on a dime. If the project needs to shift, we can do that very easily, because of our ability to constantly be distracted and constantly have so many things on our mind.
Yeah, and like you said, it is the what we're talking about here, right, is pretty complex, right? And so, and there are a lot of different pieces to consider. And part of that too is like this strengths-based approach, like you said, right? Where again, it might take some time to kind of discover that, right? So in that vein, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So do you work with the clients in this space of strengths to kind of like right? Maybe they might come in thinking, oh man, again, coming from that compare and despair space and not knowing like, why can't I do what other people seem to be able to seamlessly be able to do? And then work with them and finding like, what are their strengths that do allow them to be able to maintain that focus and attention and being able to kind of remain engaged, right? Once they identify what their thing is.
100%. Actually, my last client yesterday, this is what we did, is that they felt like it was just so unfair that they struggled in so many different places. And so I validated that and we went with that, right? But then also switching to like, what are the things that you have that maybe other people don't? What are your strengths in this space? And how do we leverage your strengths to make up for those places where you feel like you're not succeeding as much, right? Because you've gotten to this point, right? Wherever you are in life, you've gotten here. So you have a bunch of strengths to get you here. How do we keep building on those instead of focusing on the places that you aren't succeeding?
Exactly. And intuitively, people might already be doing things in their lives and they don't even know that that's a strength, right? So being able to point that out to them, like, hey, you're actually doing this thing. You're actually like instinctively already approaching how to enhance your functioning in this way.
100%. I think the one that I hear the most often where people are like angry at themselves for, but is actually a huge positive is the TV is on while I do mundane tasks. I wish I could just have the TV off. I don't want to be watching TV this much, right? But that's actually a coping tool that people have learned, that the TV is entertaining enough that it's releasing dopamine so that you can do this other task that you really don't want to do without having to think about it too hard. So like how cool that you discover that a podcast, a TV, an audiobook helps you get your laundry folded, right? Like whatever you need to get it done, that's you figuring out what your strengths are and how to like get things going.
Right. So full disclosure, right? We are redoing this a second time, right? Because I forgot to hit record last time. But when you talked about this last time, and then I had a conversation with someone and they brought up the word procrastination and they were like, oh, I know I should be doing it, but I can't, right? And so I was like, well, what if you listen to music while you're doing your homework? Right. Or what if you focus for like 10 minutes on something and then do 10 minutes of something else that you really enjoy and then go back?
Exactly. How do we get creative with making sure our brain is stimulated enough to do a task that we don't want to do? Because willpower doesn't exist for us. We can't just sit down and just get it out unless there's a consequence, right? If your test is tomorrow and you know if you get an F, you will fail the class, you are likely to be there all night and get it done. But if that doesn't exist, which later on in adult life, things like that don't really exist outside of work, right? No one's going to like yell at you because your laundry isn't done. You're not getting an F in laundry. How do you figure out how to be creative in order to, finish the task?
Yeah, especially if folding laundry isn't a strength or an interest, right?
Exactly. Yes, that's definitely coming from me. I hate doing laundry. I find it so mundane. But I think this is a great time to help us move into how this can show up in your home life. And I will just start by saying we're going to go into romantic, social, finances, free time, organization, and health. So we're digging into a lot of this. So slow me down, ask me questions. And I just want to make sure that I'm being clear as we're talking through this part.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. In romantic relationships, the start of a relationship can feel really intense. That goes back to our emotion regulation piece, right? We feel ADD and ADHD, generally people can feel all emotions pretty strongly, including positive ones. So in that start of a romantic relationship where things are exciting and fun, well, you're hyper-focusing, right? You're probably going to hyper-focus on how good that feeling is. And so you might be wanting to text them all the time. It might be the only thing on your mind. And your relationships might have a quicker timeline than other people's relationships. Once you get to the long-term relationship status, there can sometimes be a power imbalance. Because executive functioning is hard for people with ADD and ADHD, it can feel like maybe one person is nagging more, or it can feel like one person's doing more tasks than the other person, especially if this isn't something that's already been communicated around. These are the tasks that I enjoy. Those are the tasks you enjoy. How do we make sure that it's a balance, right? So if that conversation doesn't exist and someone's like, you must do tasks A, B, and C, and you hate them, you're probably not going to be able to do them. And they, if they're neurotypical, expect you to be able to do them. So that imbalance can very much affect relationships. And people with ADD and ADHD are significantly more likely to get a divorce. This was in a most recent article by the NIH. But I think it was like for first-time marriages, the general divorce rate is like 15%. And I don't know if those numbers are fully, I think I'm in a ballpark area. And then for ADHD people, first-time marriages are likely to go to divorce around 28 to 30%. And I will say that I know that a lot of Americans have heard the 50% statistic, 50% of marriages fail. The thing that we're really missing about that is that that's looking at all marriages, including second time, third time, and fourth time marriages. And so first time marriages actually have a much lower divorce rate. And so you might actually be thrown by that 15% number, but just clarifying why that exists.
Got it. And yeah, so when you talk about like the power differential and divvying up the roles, right?
Mm-hmm.
And being able to know like, okay, yeah, this is my strength. This is not my strength. I know that you want me to do this thing, right? But just, know that I'm challenged in that area. And so if, that can be really frustrating, right? I even, know some friends that are in that situation, right? Where it's like, oh, I really want you to just be able to, right? Just be able to do this thing. And they're like, I'm sorry, I really want to help you in this way, but I just am not able to do that.
Yes.
Right. And so being able to maybe find some common ground around like what those differences are, right?
Yeah.
And what the limitations are, but also just because I might be saying no to helping in this one particular way means I'm saying yes to being able to help in this other way.
Exactly. Yeah. So maybe your passion is cooking, and maybe you're okay being able to cook every day, but you really don't enjoy taking out the trash, or you don't enjoy laundry, right? Like, how do you divvy it up? So maybe one person's doing 2 tasks versus your one, but your one is more intense. And then the second thing to really think about is that a neurotypical brain generally does or it can do a similar task every day. So they can clean a little bit every day. They can get the mail every day, things like that, right? A neurodivergent brain doesn't really hold tasks like that in their brain the same way. And so they're probably not going to be getting the mail every week or every day, but they might be able to get it every Sunday. Maybe that's just like what they do, is the mail is a Sunday activity, right? So just like helping them figure out other ways to go about it. One of the biggest ones on TikTok right now is people generally can hate folding things. Folding can be really hard for people that are neurodivergent. And so instead of folding things, really organizing your closet to be a lot more hanging or buckets, and just having a bucket for t-shirts and a bucket for pants. And so then things are just going in the bucket and things are organized, but aren't taking so much from you.
And they're organized in a way that like where it is, right? Again, you're setting up that environment to be able to, in a way that that you can, function, optimally. And so, yeah, you're still finding different ways to set that up for yourself.
Exactly. Organized chaos.
There you go. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah. And so you and your partner need to be on the same page around what that organized chaos can look like, right? And maybe that means you guys need to have 2 separate closets, or, someone needs to have, what are those things called? They're big and you can store clothes in them, like dressers, but with hanging space. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, like ottomans or something like that, or the closets?
Like the closets that aren't, they're like wooden closets. Anyway, this doesn't matter. But finding creative ways to go about.
Armoire. It's an armoire.
Armoire. Yes. Yes. My brain is going, because I'm ADD, my brain is like Narnia. They go inside the closet, but what is it called? Like, I'm just picturing that in my head. I'm like, what is that thing called?
I love that depiction. Yeah. Yeah. Right. And yeah, because that just goes to show, right? We have sometimes we have different ways of processing and thinking about things. And sometimes I'll even communicate in a particular way to my partner, and he's like, I don't understand like how you're like linking these two things together. I'm like, I know, but like this is just how I'm seeing it. Like, go with me here.
Exactly. Just if they make sense in my brain, just go with me. I promise that it'll all make sense at one point.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think using that communication is a great way to segue into social situations and how ADD and ADHD can show up there. So we can often cut people off when they're finishing sentences because you might have already finished their sentence in your brain and you want to get to the next thing. It's not because you find them, well, you might find them boring, but it's probably more likely that you're like you're excited about it. You're like, oh, yeah, I get what you're saying. I want to make you feel understood. And like, where are you going from here? Like, let's go. Right. And it can also sometimes feel like you're more vulnerable than you want to be. You might have started talking and then not really been able to figure out when you want to stop or how much you want to share. And that can be a huge impact around social situations where people are like, oh, I think I just talked the whole time. Or I can't believe I shared that really embarrassing story with a room full of strangers. I wish I hadn't. And so that like forced vulnerability that can happen because of a lack of impulse control. And then going back to finding people boring, you might zone out when people are boring to you. And there's an ADHD test that like, I don't administer the test, but it's something that we go over the symptoms by looking at it, right? And so one of the questions is like, do you zone out when people are boring or when someone's talking to you? And my client was like, no, I'm always listening. But like, if they're really boring, yeah, I don't listen. I'm like in a daydream in my head. And I think that's so accurate to how a lot of us feel. It's like when the person's interesting, we're really focused, but being able to bring that attention back when it's a conversation that doesn't interest you, right? It's hard to stay in it.
It almost kind of reminds me of when you said like, well, if I'm going to do something, like it needs to make sense to me, like why I'm going to do it, right? So it sounds like a little bit like that, right?
Yes. Exactly. Why am I listening to you right now? Right? Someone listening to me right now could be like, the social situations things doesn't apply to me. Why am I listening? Move on to the next piece.
Which is finances.
Which is finances. Exactly. So with this diagnosis, finances can be difficult because of impulse spending. So therefore saving and like just being able to build towards retirement can be really difficult. You're also more likely to be able to spend on things that bring you joy rather than the essentials. So you might buy that new purse you were looking at before you paid for registration. You might go on the trip that you were planning before you take care of your dental work, right? Like things like that, just because prioritization is hard. So finances might be getting pulled tight because you've decided, well, I have to go on that trip, and then you come home and you still have to do your dental and you didn't really figure it out correctly. So really looking at like, what are you spending money on first? And are you saving as much as you want? Or is it that as soon as you walk into a store, like money is leaving your hand? And there are like tips and tools around this, right? Like personally, I can't walk into a Whole Foods. I just did this recently. I walked into a Whole Foods because my app ordering system didn't work. And I spent triple the amount that I normally spend on the app.
No, are you serious?
I know. Because on the app, right, you're searching for exactly what you want. So impulse control, way more controlled. When you're in the store, things look so much more fun and you're just grabbing things and you can't fully, especially if you're hungry, but just in general, it's harder to be like, do I really need this thing?
So between the impulse control and the dopamine, right? So I feel better if I'm going to be buying this thing, right? So those are two things to be considering as part of this process here. And so when you were talking about the prioritization piece, right? Do you find that working with clients that they're aware of, oh yeah, I know that I'm prioritizing the trip over my health visit? They're not, that's not something that they're conscious of, right?
No, not all the time. I think it takes, sometimes there is. If we've been talking about this long enough and we've been reflecting for long enough, we can get to a point where they're like, yeah, no, I see that I didn't pay for registration and instead I got my nails done, right? Like I see that I did that. But I think especially in the beginning, it's not even something that's considered. It's normally like, I just don't have enough money. Like, how am I supposed to pay my bills? and then you like really get into it.
Yeah, so it shows up a different way. Yeah, yeah. And so that's the part that I think would be super frustrating, right? Is that you're kind of like going along and doing your thing in this particular way. But like you said, a lot of what doesn't get covered is how it actually impacts us in our lives in these very specific ways.
Exactly. You're watching your friends maybe build a savings account and be able to buy a house. And then you're looking, might make the similar amount, but you're like, I'm nowhere close. And that's because of the impulse spending and the lack of being able to prioritize. And like we talked about, right? When I finish this task, I will feel good. That dopamine doesn't exist for us. So with something so long-term, like buying a house, right? How are you going to it's going to take so much more willpower or so many more systems in place for you to be able to do that. Just talking about coping tools for this specific situation, right? Like having it so that certain money is going to a savings account without you ever touching it. Like, how you can set that up with work. Making sure that you're giving the most that you feasibly can to your 401k, like things like that. Doing it in ways that you're not actually handling the money, right? Things are just being put aside and then you know how much you have. And that way it's not, you can't overspend because everything else has already just been allocated without you having to think about it.
Yeah, you already have some systems in place. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And talk to a financial planner, figure out what those systems need to look like. Talk about what can I actually put away. And if you have credit card debt, talk to a financial planner about like what that looks like, right? To get out of it and where you need to cut back.
In honor of ADHD Awareness Month, we will release an episode each Wednesday that focuses on different aspects of this mental health condition. Join us next week for our third episode in this series as we discuss hobbies as a strength, systems and organization to enhance functioning, impacts that ADHD has on health, as well as explore the comorbidity with anxiety and depression.